Welcome to Far West. Far West was just a large prairie as you look out over the prairie here. We're in the center of 1 square mile. The city of Far West was laid out with the temple behind us as the center of the 1 square mile. The saints were run out of Jackson County in 1833, and they went into Clay County and were received quite well until the people, you might say, of Clay County, that was north of Jackson County, got tired of them. And so a man by the name of Alexander Donovan, who was a general, a brigadier general in the Missouri militia, decided that the Mormons needed a place for themselves. And so he was instrumental in going before the state legislature, him being a politician himself, and arranging for Ray County to be divided into 2 more counties, one being Caldwell County, and then one further north being Daviess County. On the 26th of December of 1836, Caldwell County was set aside for the Mormons. And Far West was their city and became the county seat of the Caldwell County. As you look at the site today, the roads and things aren't quite the same as they were in 1836 and 1838. I have here a book that is very helpful to not only locate where the Mormons lived in Caldwell County, but it also has a lot of maps and drawings that were done by Ron Romig, who was the archivist for the RLDS Church a few years ago, and has maps of Far West as it's laying out the present roads and the roads the way they were. Also, he has the plat map of the city of Far West. One thing that was unique about the city was the wide roads and the wide streets around the temple. The history of Far West is told first by a historian by the name of Pearl Wilcox. Pearl Wilcox was a historian for the RLDS Church, and she wrote her book in 1972. And she includes a history of Far West and Hans Mill in this book. Another historian of record is a lady by the name of Bertha Booth, who lived in Hamilton. She was a school teacher in the Hamilton. She wrote a book called A Brief History of Caldwell County. And she was quite favorable in her accounts of the Mormons in the county here. And she had this little booklet, A Brief History of Caldwell County, that was mandatory reading for all of the students in the Hamilton School District. There have been a lot of books written about Far West. Here's another book that's available. There's one written by a local member of the Far West, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. His name is Keith Shurtleff. Another book of Far West. All of these books have a little section on Far West. One of the things that we should talk about is how it came about. Joseph Smith came to Missouri in the early 1830s, went to Jackson County. Joseph then came and helped organize the Missouri presidency of the church. He organized the second stake of the church. The first stake was in Kirtland, Ohio, the second being in Far West, Missouri, and he organized the stake presidency consisting of David Whitmer and his brother John Whitmer, who lived just down Far West Road here, a half a mile. And then you see the green trees down there, that's where his homestead is. And W.W. Phelps. Well, Thomas Marsh and his companion went into the southern states in 1836, 1837, and collected money for what they called the Poor Camp of Israel. And they brought about $1,700 that they borrowed from the saints in Tennessee and Kentucky at 10% interest, and he gave it to W.W. Phelps and John Whitmer, who bought a square mile here, or what they call a section. And they kept this in their names. They started selling the lots here at Far West in their name, making a profit. And this upset Joseph, and it upset the people to the point that John Whitmer and W.W. Phelps and David fell in disfavor, and Joseph asked Sidney Rigdon to counsel him on what to do about these former presidents' presidency of the church here in Missouri. On the 17th of June of 1838, Sidney Rigdon gave a sermon called the Salt Sermon here at Far West. And in that sermon, he took a quote from the Bible where if salt has lost its savor, it's to be trampled under the feet of man. And this was a warning to the Whitmers and Oliver Cowdery and W.W. Phelps, Lyman E. Johnson, that they were no longer in harmony with the church and were like salt that's lost its savor. And as a result, they were threatened and told to leave the city of Far West. On the 4th of July of 1838, the saints gathered here to once again work on the temple site here on July 4th of 1837, the saints gathered here, about 1,500 of them, and dug the footings and foundation and laid the cornerstones for the temple. And they did it again in 1838. But Joseph was unhappy about it. He felt that rather than man or the presidency going ahead with the plans of the temple, it ought to be under the direction of the Lord. And so, as a result, he gave a revelation from the Lord that it would be held for a season and would commence on the 6th of April of 1839. And at the same time, the apostles would leave for their missions, primarily to England, from the temple site in 1839. Well, a lot of dissension, bad feelings occurred here among the saints, and some of the leadership of the church apostatized and left the church and later was excommunicated here at Far West. I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about what was here actually at Far West. First off, there were 7 sections of the Doctrine and Covenants given here to Joseph Smith. Section 113 to 120. These sections are found in the Doctrine and Covenants, and they're also found on the plaque on the other side of the wall where I'm standing here. Section 16 addresses a place where Adam lived when he left the Garden of Eden, called Adam on Diamond. Section 115 identified the area of Far West as a holy and sacred land. Significant in this revelation is the fact that through church history, up to the time of the revelation, the church has gone under or been referred to several different names, including Latter-day Saints, the Church of Christ. However, in this revelation, the Lord made it known the official name of the church would be, "For thus my church be called in the last days, even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." Of course, we have heard our present-day prophet Nelson reiterate that that's the proper name of the church, and that was in a section, a revelation given to Joseph Smith here at Far West. Well, you can read those sections yourself. I wanted to tell a little bit about the daily life here at Far West. As the Mormons began to settle Far West, daily life consisted mostly of building homes, establishing, putting in crops, spinning and making clothing, and preparing meals. During the Far West era, the majority of Mormons made their living by farming. And they owned farmlands in areas outlying Far West. Joseph Smith and Hiram also had farms here at Far West. Joseph Smith is purported to have a house that was a couple 200 yards over in this direction over here. And when he first came here, and when he fled Kirtland in the winter of 1838, he came here and lived in a man by the name of George Washington Harris home for a couple months. There were stores at Far West, dry goods stores. Right along this area here, there was some hotels. John Whitmer had a hotel right in this field right here. There was a school at Far West. Right here on the square here was a log school. There are several blacksmith shops. I want to read a little bit of a letter that was given to me by Charlene Ward, who was the county clerk 20 years ago. A man by the name of Adolphus Babcock wrote to his brother Aaron in 1837 describing the land here at Far West and trying to convince his family to move here. This was a handwritten letter. It was hard to read. I gave this to Wayne Galbraith, who passed away just a month ago. Wayne is the one that should be giving this lecture today on Far West. He was most knowledgeable about it, but he deciphered this letter for me and typed it up. I'd like to read a couple paragraphs from it. This country is good for a poor man, or for a rich man, or for a lazy man, or for a hunter. Cash is very plenty. Grain and meat is up very high. Corn is $1.25 and $1.50 a barrel, and it's 5 bushels to the barrel. It's sold in the fall for 75 cents a barrel. Fresh pork sold in the winter for 3.5 cents per hundred. It was never, $3.50 per hundred. It was never known to send here high before. Honey at 50 cents per gallon, butter 12.5 cents per pound, sugar 16 cents per pound, coffee 25 cents per pound, wheat, salt, bushel potatoes 25 cents. Did you know that the saints at Far West drank coffee? He talks about the land, how productive it was, and how plentiful the game was. He talks in his letter about there being deer and elk, pelicans, swans, brants, wild geese all winter long in ponds and rivers. There are hundreds of wild geese tamed. There are 3 kinds of eagles. The wild geese, pelicans, and swans you can hear 3 and 4 and 5 miles. There are ravens, crows, turkey buzzards, a few robins in the fall. The wild animals, a few bear, deer, rabbits, very plentiful. The rabbits are so plentiful they're bad for our gardens. They are as thick as the striped squirrels are in the east. Some wolves of both kinds, prairie and forest wolves, some elk and buffalo in the state, some otters, some muskrats and minks, large squirrels. No porcupines in the state. Skunks and woodchucks are plentiful. No rats. They can raise from 50 to 75 bushels of corn to the acre. There's a great amount of hemp and tobacco raised in the state. Great place for turnips and pumpkins. Here is the largest watermelons raised, the best that I have ever saw. The best peaches and apples and plums. The wild plums are as good as any as the tame plums in the east. This country is great for anything, and everything that a person can raise will fetch the cash quick. If Joseph Smith is a false prophet, he has found the best country, I believe, in the world. It appears to me that in the latter days, there are many signs and wonders in the skies, and he talks about some of the signs and wonders, and the local people think that those are signs of the Mormons, the second coming of Christ. It's an interesting letter of a person describing what it was like here at Far West. Well, they lived peacefully here pretty much until August of 1838, when they went to vote. Found out that the Missourians did not want them to vote, because if they did, they would elect Mormons to all the county offices. So, on the 6th of August, when the Mormons up by Adirondack in Daviess County went to vote, they were told they couldn't vote. And there was a election day brawl where there was a lot of people clubbed and bruised, and when they broke up the fight, the Missourians headed to get their guns, and the Mormons fled for their homes and hid till things cooled down. Then things got worse up again up in Daviess County, where a pair of militia called the Danites went into the town of Gallatin and Millport and burned the town and destroyed several stores and buildings, and greatly alarmed the people in Daviess County. And as a result, why this spilled off and affected the people down in Caldwell County also. And then in September of 1838, there was a group of saints that came from Canada that settled a town called DeWitt in Carroll County. And they were run out of DeWitt. Joseph Smith went there with a group of Mormon militia, and they decided to surrender the Mormons there and move to Far West. Then on the 26th of October 1838, the bugle sounded and the bells were ringing here in the square at Far West, and they got word that 3 Mormons were, actually it was 2 and a non-Mormon, that were being held captive down a place called Crooked River, when they made Caldwell County a a place for the Mormons. They put a 6-foot barrier, a 6-mile barrier called the Buncombe Strip between Ray County and Caldwell County. And a Missouri militia led by Captain Bogart was to patrol this area, and the Mormons were not to live in that 6-mile strip. But he found people in there, and he had detained them, and so the group of Danites that were formed here in Caldwell County, about 60 of them, 3 different groups led by David Patton, Harley P. Pratt, went down to get these 3 prisoners and resulted in a skirmish that was called the Battle of Crooked River. The Mormons were victorious, and rumors got back to the governor, Governor Liburn Boggs, that all of the Missouri militia were killed. And this was the case in a lot of the reports that got back to Governor Boggs. Is greatly exaggerated about what the Mormons were doing, and as a result, on the 27th of October, Governor Boggs issued Order Number 44, which is now the infamous extermination order. They got the word extermination actually from Sidney Rigdon in his salt sermon, where they said they would no longer be pushed out of their places that they live, that it would be a war between us and them, and a war of extermination. And so Governor Boggs picked up on that word, and that's where the extermination order came. We'll learn more about the extermination order when we talk about the Eminence, where Joseph Smith surrendered. We might make reference of some other books. A man by the name of Leland Homer Gentry did a PhD dissertation in 1976. He was the first one to do a complete history of the Mormons in this area. The last couple of years, they updated his research, and another author by the name of Todd Compton updated this history of the Latter-day Saints in northern Missouri from 1836 to 1839, and made some corrections and some updates. 10 years ago, they had a symposium down at the state capitol, and we had authors from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the RLDS Church, or Community of Christ now, and some Gentile or non-Mormon authors presenting the Missourian point of view. And it was interesting. He called it the Missouri Mormon Experience. About 10 or 12 papers were delivered. One of them was delivered by favorite author of mine, Alex Baugh. Alex Baugh did a PhD dissertation In, I believe, 96, it was called A Call to Arms, and talked about the Missouri problems from 1838. And his text, Call to Arms, is an update of Leland Gentry's work. Another great book you can read is this one here called Sacred Places, Volume 4. PhD scholar Brigham Young by the name of Lamar C. Barrett was the author, along with several others, of this book. I call this the textbook of Mormon history. Excellent chapters here on what we have talked about: the Eminence, Far West, Adamond, Hans Mill. It's the couple pages in this book that Lamar Barrett introduced me to the Eminence, that we'll talk about later on. I'd like to read a couple excerpts from some of these articles here. By July 1837, it is estimated that 100 buildings, including 8 stores, several grist mills, 300 farms totaling several thousand planted acres, was happening here at Far West. The population grew until it's estimated that there were 5,000 people living in the area of Far West. In the 1st of October, there were about 600 people that came from Kirtland, Ohio. They were called the Poor Camp of Kirtland. There were a lot of people that wanted to come to Far West since Joseph Smith was here in February, March. Why, it then became the headquarters of the church. And people wanted to come here, but they didn't have the means to come here. And so Joseph made the presidency of the 70s Quorum responsible for bringing anyone that was worthy and wanted to come to Far West to come here. Well, they came into this area just as things were starting to get bad. About 10 wagons from the Kirtland camp stopped off at Hans Mill. They were led by Joseph Young, Brigham Young's brother. And as I've said in the Hans Mill tape, that they were some of the people that were killed there. But these poor Kirtland camp, only about half of them made it this far, and Joseph felt that the Far West was too crowded. There wasn't room for them. And so he sent the poor camp, Kirtland camp, up to Adamond for them to live up there. Let's talk a little bit about what happened after the governor signed the extermination order. The saints here at Far West were called to surrender and to move out of the state. General Clark took pity upon their condition and allowed them to have a few months in the middle of winter time, and winter was just coming on, to wait for spring for them to be removed by the state. The surrender of Far West was right here at the temple site. The Missouri militia came into the city and took people captive. Hiram Smith was arrested in his house. We'll talk more about the arrest of Joseph and those with him at the Eminence. Just a point of interest here, if you'll turn the camera around, down by the dumpster, just before you get to the dumpster, it looks like there's a flat place, kind of a lighter color green. This was pointed out to me that this was the site of Jacob, John Whitmer's son. Jacob D. Whitmer owned the property here with the temple on it for many years after the Mormons left, and the general authorities from Salt Lake would come here and try to buy this land from the Whitmers. And Jacob David Whitmer had a double cabin down there. If you look at closely, the book called The Church History of the Church in Black and White by George Edward Anderson, you can see a cabin in the trees. And that's where it was, right there. It would be nice someday if maybe that was recognized as being a cabin site. While we are here at the plaque, this was all designed by Salt Lake City, an architect by the name of Emil Fetzer, and a man by the name of Alvin R. Dyer was the mission president for the Central States Mission. And they felt that some improvements needed to be made here, so in 1966, I believe, they brought David O. McKay, who was the prophet here, and showed him the site here that was nothing but a cow pasture. And while he was here, he teared up when he was looking over toward the east. And he made a comment that was repeated by Joseph Smith to a man by the name of Reed Peck, that this is where Cain killed Abel, that this land is a sacred and holy place, a section of the Doctrine and Covenants, primarily because this is an area, extension like Adam-on-Diamond, where Adam and his posterity lived. Another thing to mention here is another section where they're given the law of tithing. The saints tried to live the law of the celestial law, the law of consecration here at Far West, and were not successful in doing it. And as a result, the law of tithing came about. If you notice these cornerstones, they've all been enclosed. Originally, the cornerstones were about 7 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 2 feet thick. But as people come here in the early days, they would chip away at the stones, and eventually there'd be nothing left to see. So that's why they put the encasements around them. The southeast corner over here has significance, because that is where the apostles left for their mission in April 6th of 1839. And a lot of events have occurred in church history on the southeast cornerstone of this temple site. The temple site is 80 feet by 110. This is about 10 or 15% larger than the Kirtland Temple, about 10 or 15% smaller than the Nauvoo Temple. This would have been a temple much the same as the Kirtland Temple, designed to be made out of stone. The different floors would be used for school and public building and for instruction. I don't know how much of the complete temple ceremony they would have had revealed to them at that time, but it would be a lot like the Kirtland Temple in design and purpose. The main street would have been right here on the other side of this plaque, and the entrance to the temple would be on the other side of the plaque. It would be facing east. The Nauvoo Temple faces west. Most other temples face east.